Hello guys, Joker the Fool here, and this is my review of the second issue of Heroic Tales. Of course, I did review the first issue of Heroic Tales from Longbox Comics. It's John, I believe, Bua's basically debut series. This is, of course, featuring the Patriarch again. He's a recurring character. He appears in the first book. That's Father's Tale. That's the main story. Then you've got the backup story, which I believe is the suit. But this is also a flip book. Absolutely love flip books. It's very much a retro thing with comics. Of course, John, a lot of his comics reading experience comes from the 80s and the early 90s. And this is very much like getting that style, probably more like 70s and 80s than early 90s. But anyways, we're going to go into the first story. This is from the Patriarch. This is Subterranean Homesick Blues. And this is, I wouldn't say an absolute continuation of the Father's Day story. The Father's Day story is an introduction to the character of the Patriarch, and this is just expanding on his story. Of course, you've got this very sensual scene with his wife, who is basically half burnt. Reminds me of Hanako from this game Katawa Shogo, if I'm saying that correctly, made from 4chan. She's also a burn victim. But anyways, he's got his wife, he's got his family, then he basically has to go and save this kid from these subterranean, Cthulhu monsters. And it's done quite well. I do absolutely like this. Of course, you got a lot of psychedelic stuff, and Renzo is the artist. He's the artist on both of these stories, and he was the artist on Father's Day. He does a fantastic job. These panel layouts are fantastic. Everything just is thick and bold and beautiful, and just really immerses you into the universe of Heroic Tales. So John has a fantastic team of artists. You got Bill Williams doing the lettering, the colorists, I believe, if I can name them. You got Daniel De La Silva Rodriguez and Oscar Carina on the Mary Sue story. They do a fantastic job. Everything looks extremely cohesive when you're reading through both of these stories, since Renzo is doing the pencils and inks on both of them. And you've got solid colorists and the same letterer doing everything. So it's just a great joy to read and flip through these books. And of course, these books have a good paper quality as well. So everything feels very high quality and definitely feels like you're reading a classic comic book, especially when you've got like the ads here. If I can flip through this one. This ad here is done by Matt Barr, and it's just very much indicative of something you would see in like a 80s, even early 90s comic. And I just absolutely love stuff like this. It's the little things that John does that makes this book really fantastic to read and flip through. But really bring off Subterranean Tales. This does give us a little bit more insight into the world. I would say you see some more villains, you see some more insight on what the world is like outside of just the Patriarch going around punching bad guys, which is basically the Father's Day story. So we were getting the veil lifted a little bit on the universe that the Patriarch lives in. Not too much so. So if you're looking at the second issue hoping you'd get everything revealed to you, that's not really the case in this one, but it's a really strong foundation. It's being built upon quite well. So I'm very excited for Heroic Tales number 3. Hopefully John does do a Patriarch series. I've heard him talking about this because he's just a very interesting character. It's in a lot of pieces, not only in just his story, but his world that I would really like to see expanded upon. And that's what I mentioned in Father's Day, and I think Subterranean Tales is a really good continuation of that. But we're going to go to Mary Sue. John has talked about this character a lot. It's basically a play on the Mary Sue archetype. So you see her name is spelled M-A-R-Y, but it's S-U instead of S-U-E. So Mary Sue is basically a female character that's like overpowered, can do no wrong, competent to basically a full word, doesn't make the character entertaining. That's basically the shtick of Mary's character, but John, I think, has basically some conflict, some development with this story. So it's not going to be a case where it's just like a girl bossing. She actually is going to have an arc in development. Although this story, I'd say it's done well. It is a little bit confusing because of the nature of this story. It is basically Mary Sue working in a lab. She gets, accelerated because she's had multiple degrees and she's accelerating her master's program. She's working in this high-powered lab, and you see this like radiation, this like counter-cosmic radiation leak because there's like this like alternate spectrum, and they're using this energy, and just basically has a lab accident, which is, how a lot of superhero comics go. It's basically, Spider-Man had radioactive spider bite him. Hulk was gamma rays. You had basically the Fantastic Four getting their powers in a space station that was exposed to a solar flare. So like it's a very typical superhero stuff. So it's a very typical superhero premise, but the way that it ends leaves you on a bit of a little bit of a trip, I would say. And I think it's good in the sense that it's from the perspective of Mary Sue. So it's going to end with her head being very confused, so the reader's head is confused as well, but it really needs a second issue. So Mary Sue's story needs a direct continuation where John explains to us, this is what's happening. I'm sure he has a plan for this, but this first issue, it does leave me scratching my head, but it also leaves me extremely interested as well. So I didn't read this thinking it was a bad story. I just left this thinking like, well, it doesn't have this super definitive, satisfying ending that you could probably have had if it was structured just a little bit differently. It leaves me thinking like I really need this like another 20 or 30 pages, basically a second issue, to explain to me what just happened. And I think that's really not like necessarily a bad thing. It just is something that kind of like detracts it from it a little bit. But visually, like I said, this is done by Renzo Art, or Renzo Rodriguez, I should say, if I'm getting the name correctly. Just want to make sure that I am. Renzo Rodriguez, because it is Renzo Rodriguez. There's a lot of Rodriguez's. I apologize for that little slip. I wasn't really slip up, but for the confusion. But anyway, Renzo does fantastic art. He does fantastic art in basically everything he's drawn. This continues here. So you got a very cohesive reading experience. Everything's laid out well. Everything's lettered well. And like I said, you've got Oscar Carino on the colors here, but it does have this consistency between this and the Subterranean story, even though you got different colorists working on this. It just has this very like rich, like pulpy style of art that really goes with the aesthetic that John's going for. Like I said, this 80s, even going from like 70s to early 90s, just that style of comics, basically the retro comics, in combination with just it being something that is just laid out well. It really works with Renzo's style. He just does something that's really, really well done. So you got the character designs that are all really well done, whether you're talking about these like psychedelic Cthulhu beasts or just regular everyday people, or all the superheroes that John has flowing around in his head. You see like a whole bunch of them there that are just kind of like mentioned and teased at, but they aren't really solidly introduced. They all look very interesting. So Heroic Tales is really a good introduction to this universe. And that's what I said with the first issue, if I'm getting that correctly. And the second issue is a good building on that foundation. But it's not basically the whole building. So if you're expecting like a super complex superhero universe from these two issues, that's of course a little bit ridiculous, but the trajectory is there. John's got a really good head on his shoulders. He's doing this for the right reasons, and he's got fantastic people with him. So definitely something you really ought to invest in, buy, and enjoy. And then hopefully he keeps on with the Heroic Tales series with these two stories. I think that format's pretty good. And then hopefully he does like an ongoing series for the Patriarch, Mary Sue, and whatever else he's got going on in his head, because he does fantastic work, and I just love seeing it. But that's all I have for you guys on this review today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Joker is out.
Thank you for stopping by the Velvet Room. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so you can keep up with Velvet Room Publishing, and go to velvetroompublishing.com if you want to go even deeper into the Velvet Room.